Hey guys, it's LJ here. Welcome back to the next part of our mini album. Today we are going to look at 7 months and a month. Enjoy! Hey, we are back. So we are going to work on our mini album. So we have just done 5 and 6 months. So we're going to start on month 7. So I've got a new base page out. So it's just like a fold out booklet. It just gives you a bit more options because I'm doing these at this width. Obviously this is 6 1/4, so you could get a 4 by 6 across, but then that is kind of the one photo for the page. Same if you're doing it this way. So I like either having lots of flaps on a page so you can get multiple photos, or doing something like this so that you can get lots. So I'm going to pop this to one side because we don't actually need this yet, because this is literally going to be design paper and the booklet. So we're going to work on the booklet. So I'm going to grab, apparently throw on the floor. I apologise for my squeaky chair. My chair is very squeaky at the moment. Okay, so let's get out my ruler. Let's grab my scoreboard. So to start, we're going to need a bigger piece. We're going to need a 12 by 12. So let's get out. This is how I buy my 12 by 12 card, by the way. Sorry, 280, not 300, yes. So the first piece we need is 7.5 by 11. So let's find 7.5. By 11. Okay. And this piece is scored at 5.5. So we'll go to 5.5. And then I'm going to put this on our page to see whether this size is going to fit, because I made this with the twins mini album, and it was ever so slightly larger than this because it was twins, so I did do it slightly larger. So I'm going to that is going to sit there. See, that is a bit big for this page. Okay, so what I did was, using printer paper, I very quickly stuck this together very quickly so that I could figure out these sizes. So I've got my sizes written down here, so we're going to go ahead and make that. If you ever have things like this where I had to change the size, so I've had to take 1 inch off the length and 1 inch off the width so that it will fit, because this is far too wide. So this piece is actually the size of this centerpiece, and then the centerpiece will be even smaller. So yes, so our first piece that we need is 6.5 by 9. Score at 4.5. So that's the first piece. We then want a piece that is 6.5. Go through my scrap. Don't know whether I've got any 6.5 pieces. What have we got? No, these are 6. So let's grab another 12 by 12. I'm going to cut this at 6.5. By 5. Six and a half by 5, and we're going to score that at 1/2 inch or 4.5, whichever works best for you. Okay, we then want 3 pieces that are 6.5 by 4.5. There's one. And then we want 2 pieces that are 6.5 by 4. Now, of course, if you wanted to use less card, you could have cut them at 6, so you could get 2 pieces out of the same piece of card. I'm cutting them at 6.5 so that I can put design paper on some and still have room for a photo that isn't necessarily cropped. Right, so now we need to put these together. So you should have 2 6.5 by 4. You should have 3 that are 6.5 by 4.5. One that is 6.5 by 5. One that is 6.5 by 9. So the 6.5 by 9 we have folded in half. Okay, have it so that it opens like a card, and then your 6.5 by 5 we are going to stick onto the top like so. Get the glue out. Stick this onto the side with the opening like so. So now we've got one that side, one that side. I'm going to open it up. No, in fact, we're going to leave it like this. So we're going to have this one gets one of these where you've got the 3. So this is the 6.5 by 4.5. Scored at 1/2 inch. And in exactly the same way as the last one, it's sticking on this open end. Open this up. Just got glue all over me. I mean, just started. How have I covered myself in glue already? And my desk. Glue everywhere now. Okay. So, to confirm, you had your six and a half by 9 that opened that way. We put the 6.5 by 5 on there, and then on the front of that we have attached the 6.5 by 4.5. Now go all the way open to your large piece. So your 6.5 by 9. Yes, you've got 2 pieces left that are 6.5 by 4.5. Those are going to stick here like doors. How is everybody doing? I'm quite excited. I've just got a letter through today, in fact, from the government saying that from the 1st of August, as long as we don't have any more outbreaks or our incidence of the virus doesn't increase, from 1st of August, I no longer have to shield. I have to stick with extreme social distancing, that I no longer have to shield, which means that I might be able to go back to work, possibly. It means that I can definitely go out and see some people. Obviously, you have to stick with social distancing, but I can go out and see friends from a group of 6 I can have from the 1st of August, so I can see some of my friends, which will be really lovely. Yes, so that'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to that. Still quite a long way away, but it is something definitely to look forward to. And I am now going to be obsessively watching whether people are being silly and going to the beach again, or, you know, my concern being, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do this, but they're planning to open pubs and bars on July the 4th. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do that, so I'm going to be watching that with interest to make sure that nobody stops me from going out later. So we've got those 2 doors now put on that piece. We're going to go all the way back to the front, and the front we've got this flap, and then we're just going to stick these on like you would a normal flap. So, to show you from the front, so you've got your front cover, which opens to the side, opens to the side again, opens to the side again, has the doors. You then open this way, and you're done. Okay, and then this is going to sit on our page like so. So you could have done a little wider if you wanted, but I quite like that it is a central piece, so you can have some nice backing paper behind it. And if I do that, let me just check. So what are we? 4.5, and our page is not quite 6.5. So you could do like an inch frame rather than doing a full back page, if that makes sense. And so then you'll have all of the openings, and you can have it going either way. So you can have it so that the book is this way, or you can have it so that the book is this way. Because this page is going to be on this side, because this is going to be here, so you've got 6 months, 7 months. If you have it this way, a lot of this bulk is going to get caught there. So I'm going to have it that way. So I'm going to have that at the top, just to remind myself, so that it pulls out more this way, where there's not another page. And now all we need to do is cover this with design paper. So yes, let's have a look at that. So we have this page, which is going to be opposite this, which is the whites. So we've got the birds, the Rockabye Baby, this one, and more birds. So I've only got a thin strip of the birds left, which isn't going to be wide enough to do 3 strips, is it? It's exactly 2 inches. So I could do them down the sides and have something different along the top, which might be nice. Yes, I am going to do that first before I do anything else. Okie dokie, so I cut this in half, so we had 2 1-inch strips ready to go on either side. What I then did was figure out which end of the paper I wanted, because obviously this isn't a very thick design. I didn't want large white patches, so I did just check which end of the strip would look better, trim them off with my scissors, and then we're going to glue them on either side. What I really like about this is just that you don't need to use
the entire sheet of paper that's not going to be seen. And this paper is so beautiful that I think hiding it behind things, which I've done for many years, is a shame. So I quite like this idea of doing the frame. So then when I'd done that, I had a look through my scraps to see if I could find something that would match. I found that nice thick bit of bird paper wasn't quite wide enough. I was going to go with the Rockabye Baby, but then going through my scraps, I managed to find some of the smaller birds in a couple of strips, and I was able to use those. And what I really liked about this was that it's the same pattern, just in a smaller size. So exactly like we did the florals a couple of pages ago. It's nice because you've got a different design, so it's pleasing to the eye, but it's not going to clash because it's not something totally different. Now obviously if you're working just from a single paper paddle collection, most things will match anyway, but I do sometimes find it can be, especially with sort of some busier patterns, it can be quite jarring to my eyes if there is a lot going on. So I quite like doing this with having the smaller pad, because then you get the same design, so it adds a really nice design element because your eyes can see a difference, but actually it doesn't jar your brain because it is the same design, just with a smaller print. And I think that's really, really cute. So that's what I've done here again. And then I've just made the frame, stuck the top and bottom on, and then we're going to put our booklet on top, and then this page is pretty much done. We just need to cover the booklet.
Then this piece is going to stick on top like so. So we're going to need some white on this front piece for definite. Definitely want some white on this front piece. Now, looking at what we've got, that would work on all of them, which is good. Do we have any middle-sized pieces that are oriented the right way? Because this is the important thing, because you've got pieces that might work, but if they're the wrong orientation, it's not going to happen. And that needs to go in here. Okay. Yeah, that's the wrong orientation, for example. It's, you know, it's not quite big enough, but you'll get the idea. You'll get the idea. You need to go in there as well. Let's take a look at these. So we don't want the yellows. That's fine. So we've got that one, wrong orientation. It's not a problem. You get pieces that are the right orientation, you get pieces that are wrong orientation. It's not a huge issue. You just need to be aware. See, things like these are great because they are multi-directional. It's not quite big enough. Might use that on one of the larger ones, maybe with some strips. Perhaps. What about this one? That again. That's the wrong orientation, as is that. You do you. This is just how I stay organised. It appeases my brain. So we might use some of those, but the front bit we want, for definite, some white. I've got all of these whites. We've got the Rockabye Baby quite prevalent there. I think we start with this teddy bear one, just because we don't have that on that page. And I think that would be a nice contrasty piece. You could, of course, just measure the piece and cut your sheets down. I usually do about 1/4 of an inch gap. But I am now trying to do a lot of this by eye, just because I find it easier. Because if you've had to trim a piece or, you know, what have you, you can't always guarantee you're going to get an easy number to shrink it down to. These are fairly okay because actually each piece was a standard size because it was all done by full inches and half inches, but I still prefer to, if I can do it this way, measure it this way, so of all the numbers to have. Oh my gosh, stop, go to the end please, thank you, so that I can check this is definitely lined up correctly. There we go. So now this piece I can use multiple times in this booklet because it's the right height, hopefully. Give that a check. That is the correct height. Yes, good. Now let's put this piece off. So this piece, there we go, will now fit nicely on this front panel, like so. Oh, we need a slight bit bigger, I think. Smaller. Can I cut a slither off this without my blade going funny? Let's see. Because nope, that's fine. It's too small a slither. That is not a problem. Let's give this a quick measure. Apologies if my head gets in the way here. I'm just trying to make sure that I've got a straight line, so we want there to there. Just cut this with my scissors. Don't know why my trimmer really hates thin strips, but it really does. It tends to buckle them all, no matter where I start from. If I start from one end, the other end, it always seems to tear into it, which I hate. There, that's better. Lovely. We're just going to stick that one straight on because we don't need magnets or anything in this piece. Now there are a couple of ways you could do this. You could magnetise each sheet, which would be nice. That's what I did on the Twins album, I believe. I did magnetise each piece so that it stayed shut. But for this one, I think we're going to use a ribbon closure because I haven't used a ribbon closure yet in this album. So we're going to do a ribbon closure because we have used some magnets. I've got a variety of different ribbons that I could use, but for this specific album, I'm thinking one of these three. So we've got the blue, we've got the white, but we've also got this nice grey, which I think is slightly nicer than the white in some situations. And I think, because we've got sort of bits of darker blue and grey on here, that all three colours would work. So I'm going to go with the blue because it's a white page, so I think having some blue ribbon will be a nice contrast. So let's see, how much are we going to want? So this is going to be around the back, and then we're going to want to tie a bow, like so, for example. This is an awful bow, don't judge me on it. There, that will do. Excellent. That was literally just done to gauge a length. That is not how I do a normal bow. Please don't judge me on that bow. Please, please. Right, let's pop this ribbon away. There we go. And undo that. Do like this ribbon. So I'm just going to stick this across the back with some red liner tape, because red liner tape works best with ribbons and things. Is that thick enough? Yes, perfect. You can eyeball the centre if you like. I am not great at eyeballing the centre of things. I think I've got it, and then I'll look again and it's totally wonky. So you do whatever works best for you. I'm just going to do that. We will rub this in. I love this tape. This is the tape that I also use on the cover. It is nice and strong. It's one of the strongest double-sided tapes you can get here in the UK, and I love it. And then you burnish it all in so all the white dots disappear, and then you know it is nice and secure. So I'm going to take off the backing, fold this in half, just so we've got a vaguely even split. And then I'm going to just put that over the top, like so. You could do 2 separate pieces, so you could save yourself, you know, save yourself what, 2.5 inches of ribbon, but I just find doing one piece is just more secure for me personally. It is totally up to you. And so then in the book, this will close up nicely and have a nice bow in it that I've somehow managed to do sideways. There we go. Oh dear. So we want a nice bow of a reasonable size to use. And then we will, there we go. So I'm going to trim this down and this one down, and I'm just going to use my lighter to seal the edges, because you don't want the ribbon to come undone. Why are you playing up? There we go. So we just want to seal the edges. Of the ribbon, there we go. That did both edges. Yes, good, perfect. So then we've got our ribbon ready on here, and we can move on to our next bit of design paper. So then we've got a strip here and a strip here, which are on 2 different sheets. So again, we could do similar to the birds, a strip of something and a strip of something, like maybe the blue to go with this. So then we'll cover this one and this one in the blue.
Okie dokie, so I decided to check which blues would work best with the ribbon, and I thought that middle tone worked. So the pages in the booklet that can be seen on that front piece, I'm going to do both of those in the blue. Therefore we get a nice blue frame around this front piece, which will look beautiful. What I wanted to do with this is I wanted to do a mix of the blue and the design paper for a couple of reasons. Partly so that it gives some variety, partly so that we're not using the design paper for every single sheet that a photo is going to be on, because as I said, this design paper is absolutely gorgeous. It's really, really cute. So having pages where every single piece is covered is a bit of a shame, really, a bit of a waste. You don't see as much of the nice paper. So on photo mats occasionally, in booklets, on, you know, the insides of flaps, I'll often do either a less exciting print from the design paper or try and do a solid colour cardstock to complement, because then you've got that differentiation as well. This blue also works beautifully with the craft card. I absolutely love these 2 colours together. So those 2 pages I did with blue. Then what I decided to do was go through and think about the other pages and decide where else I wanted that blue, and I did all the blue first. So I flicked through. I wanted to make sure that things had a nice balance of blue and the design paper, as I said. What I really like about this design paper is it is light enough that you could journal on it if it was something that you wanted to do. Obviously there's no requirements for how anyone fills in these albums, but I did think that would be a nice page so they could, you know, jot down some notes about what was happening or what was going on at that moment in time.
Okay, so I just wanted to point something out. I don't know whether anyone else feels the same way as me, but I thought I'd show you this bit. So obviously this piece was cut there, so the pattern continues. Now if they were right next to each other, then fine, but here where they're this far apart, it might not for everyone, but it really jars my eye because I can see that these join, but there's such a huge gap. So in that situation, either you can cut off a strip and then carry on, or I'm just going to swap these over. They're the same size piece and put them like that, and then it doesn't jar my brain. So yeah, that was just an explanation. I don't know whether anyone else feels the same as me, but that's my thought process here. So we're going to have this sat on there like so, and then we'll go through the pages. So I've done this front piece, which is where I'll put the month bubble when I get those printed off. I've got a blue there and a blue there just so that we get a nice frame for this piece. So if we open to this side, you've got a blue and a design paper. Again, 2 blue, 2 design papers and 4 inside. Now I've tried to do some more of the blue because you could do some journaling about the photo. So you could have a photo here and then write here the event, for example. So I've tried to do sort of a mix of design paper and blue so that A, it's not too bulky because the blue is thinner, but also that you get that option to do either or. And if we come the other way, we've got a double blue, the blue and that design paper. So we're going to stick this on to our page. So let's do this. Let me do a bow here. And turn it up this way because I seem to keep. There we go, that's a nice centre point. These are amazing for tying a bow. So they're I'm not actually sure what they're called, but they hold the piece. They hold whatever you want it to in place securely, because it is held by, it's just held there. I don't remember what they're called, but they're absolutely brilliant because, you know, I often want someone to have a finger in the middle when I'm tying a bow. Now I don't need to because I've got these tweezers which do it for me. So then we're going to have a nice bow here. Lovely. And then this is going to sit onto our base page. I apologise, my chair is so squeaky at the moment. Like so. You can get about ½ an inch on each because this, to remind you, is 6.5 and our page is 7 3/4, which gives us 1 1/4. Is that right? 6.5. Yes. So it gives us 1 1/4, which is 8 10/8. So you can do 5/8 in, which is 1 2 3 4 5. So there, and 1 2 3 4 5, which is there. I may go ever so slightly lower just so that this is definitely secured on. I'm going to use a mix of double-sided tape and glue for this because I want this to be secure, and this is, you know, a thicker, heavier piece. I just got a new roll of my double-sided tape arrived. I absolutely love this. The roll is huge, it's wonderful.
Okay, so I'm going to put 3 rows of this double-sided tape on the back. I do like using a thicker one for times like this, over the ribbon to give it that extra security. I'm going to peel off the backing and then we're going to stick our glue on. I'm going to use a combination of glues for this. Because it's quite a big piece with the tape on, I want some wiggle room. So I'm going to use my Kalal glue. You could use any of the beacons, the Fabri-Tac, the 3-in-1. Any glue like that will work and give you some wiggle room. Then the art glitter glue is going around the edges just to give some extra grip and security. Once I've got it in place, I'm going to use my T-ruler to make sure that it is straight on the page, which is always useful. Then I'm going to push it down to try and spread the glue out. And then I'm going to pop my bone folder underneath to burnish. If you were any good at bows, you could just open this up. But I'm going to leave the bow on for now because I can burnish it from the other side. So using my bone folder there and going in between the two pages as well to burnish it and make sure it's stuck.
Right, so that is our 7 months. And then we're going to turn to 8 months. And for 8 months, we're going to do, just going to weigh this down with that while I explain what we're doing. So for 8 months, we're going to do an explosion page, what I class as an explosion page, which basically means there is a flap that comes top and bottom and a flap that comes side to side. So the whole page basically opens up and you've still got the back base page. But this piece doesn't have any edging pieces, so there's no punch, there's no stubbed corners. So I am going to want to do some on this page so that every double page has the same sort of design elements in it, if that makes sense. Well, pieces. I'm going to pop that a bit further, there we go, that way, so that I don't bump into it with my, I was about to call this my scoring tool. Oh my gosh, my paper trimmer. Come on, woman, focus on what you're doing. So I'm wanting, how wide are these pieces? How wide are these pieces? These are 5 3/4. 1, 2, 3, 4 of these should be enough to create this piece. So we'll start with the first one. So we're going to cut a piece that is 5 1/2 by 6 1/4. So I'm going to do the 6 1/4 first, and then I'm going to cut this at 5 1/2. And we want 2 of those. Now often I will use whatever scraps I've got, but for this page I did have a plan of the sizes just so that I know it will meet and allow me to do the closure that I want to do. That doesn't work when I put that on top of my box of scraps, my bag of scraps, sorry. There we go. These side pieces are just going to have a 1/2 inch score for a flap. Do our... Now I will admit that doing an 1/8 of an inch is difficult to burnish easily on card that is this thick. It doesn't like to do it. There we go. So then this will have that very small, it's only an 1/8 of an inch, but you'll get that gap in between, which gives you space to add in your design paper, your pictures, everything. And then I didn't do it on the page previous. I ended up doing the pocket with a tag to keep it closed, didn't I? So this one we're going to do the tie closure, which I will show you in a second. Let me just empty this because this is getting quite full. Pop that into my recycling bin. Lovely. Okey-dokies. So we're going to need to bring this back now. Love it. Absolutely love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. Right. So we'll start with our sideways pieces. No, we won't. We'll start with our up and downies because that is going to be a better way to do that because of the gussets. There we go. Again, you can use tape if you prefer. You can use any glue. I'm going to flatten, I should have done that first, flatten the gusset just to make it easier to line up straight. I will repop the gusset as soon as it's in, but I'm going to flatten it just so that I can get it lined up right on the correct line. There we go. Look at that, beautiful. Nice. Let me pop, easy, pop a clip there and here to secure that. I'll do the other side again. I'm going to flatten the gusset just to make it easier. Just to make it easier, that's all. It will pop back up quite easily because we've scored and burnished it, so there's no worry there. Let's add this to the top and the bottom. No, the top, I was right. Pop that on, get that lined up nicely on the sides. Yes, good, lovely. Come here. Corner doesn't want to stay down. There we go. And I'm going to burnish it from this side just because it's harder to burnish with this booklet on. There we go. Swap the clips to this end to give it a moment to let the glue dry fully. This side then we can pop up the gusset and check we line up nicely, which we do. Very nice. Top one seems to be slightly wonky, but I think that is just where I've done the gusset. Yes, there we go. That is just the way I'd folded the gusset, that's all. I didn't want it to line up. There we go. Excellent. So that's going to be our top and bottom, which is going to be tied with one of the twisty tie tags. Twisty tie tags. I know what I'm trying to say. So then we've got our side pieces, and I'm going to ever so slightly, and I mean ever so slightly, notch these edges just to save a little bit of bulk. You're not going a huge way because we still need it all to be covered, but from the fold line, don't go past the fold line. From that fold line, we're just going to take off a corner like so. Okay, and do that on all of them, on both of them, should I say, not all of them. There is only two. Yep. Throw that one around, apparently. You don't want to do it too deep, because if you do it too deep, you will lose a lot of the structural integrity of it, and we want this to be secure. we just want to remove a little bit of bulk where those corners are, because the corners are, you know, going to be under a lot more pressure. They're going to be used a lot more.
So we're going to stick our side panels on. Now these are ever so slightly smaller than the height of your page, because you've got hinge top and bottom, and you do not want to get in the way of that. So when you stick these on, you need to make sure it's centered up and down. So you've got about just over 1/8 of an inch at the top and the bottom. So you need to make sure you're away from those two hinges so it doesn't affect the fold line. And then when you stick the second one on, you can just line it up with the first one and you're good to go. Quite a simple page, but it can look really, really good once you get everything together. I do like this one. It just needs a better name.
Okey-dokies. The observant of you may notice I have a different coloured pin in my glue. I went to put the blue one back in and bent it completely so it wouldn't fit, which was annoying. So I have a new pin. Right, so we will turn this over and we're going to have it this way so that the top closes over the bottom and we have our attachment. This is our page. We've got a top and a bottom, a side and a side. That is, I class as an explosion page. It all goes out. I don't know if you have another name for it, please let me know. I don't really like the name explosion page, but that's what I saw someone call it and it made sense in my head. So if you've got a better name for this page layout, let me know, because I don't think it's quite right, but yes. So then all we need to do is cover this in design paper. You could put magnets on this as well if you wanted. I'm not going to. It doesn't need it. It's going to be inside this closure. So what colours do we have? Let's have a quick run through from the start. So we've got a white page, the green and the blues, the yellows are white. So we could do greens and blues again. Let's take a look and see what we have got. So we've still got this piece, which and this piece, which could come under. Those are more yellows, so we'll save that for a bit. We'll do a yellow page in a little bit. Let's see, I've still got this really odd shaped piece of the flower paper where I used, in fact, when I did this page on a previous album, I cut out the mats from here to try and get all 4 out of one piece of paper, which was a fiddle to cut, but and has left me with this odd shaped piece. So I want to try and use this, but I'm not sure where I'm going to yet. So we don't want yellow. Could use this one. I've already forgot what I said, greens and blues, didn't I? So that one could work. Let's go and have a look. So we could do our green teddies, or the cars possibly. Yeah, we'll definitely use that one. We haven't used that yet. Could do this one. We'll use this to do our pieces, which I'll explain. Yeah, so let's start with that. Let's start with this. So I think what we'll start with, this piece for the top, definitely. Top flap being this, I think that is without question.
So I'm going to cut this piece down. I haven't used this sheet before. I do think it is rather busy, but once you get it down to a smaller size, I couldn't find my pencil mark there because I've done it so lightly. Once you get it down to a smaller size, actually the pattern isn't quite as overwhelming. And I do love the green on this. It is a gorgeous green. Shame it doesn't quite match perfectly to the other greens in the book, because I really do like it, but there you go. So there is our top flap, and I'm going to just put this on with some temporary tape because we're going to be sorting out our closure in a little bit. I then tried to decide the bottom flap. Do I want the same design, which I was originally thinking, but then I did think maybe this is a bit busy. So I had a quick flick through, tried to find some other designs that I thought would work with this green. But as you can see there, it doesn't quite match the other greens in the paper pad, which really frustrated me because normally they're really good at together, but they just don't seem to match. Even with the 6x6 pieces, the green is slightly off with the other greens. So there we go. Then I was going to do the flowers, and I thought that was a bit busy as well. In the end, I did go with the same design paper, because once we've got our closure on and our month bubble and any other decorations, actually it will tone down the pattern, so it's not too much of an issue. So again, I'm going to cut that to size, stick it on with some temporary tape so that we can organise our closure. And this temporary tape just means I can remove it easily, that's all. So I found this 6x6 sheet which I thought would work perfectly for our closure, and then I'm just going to test what size this circle punch is so we can make our closure. Let's see, where do we want? So we don't want this, actually I don't think I want a green, I want a white here. White here. White here. What is wrong with me? Don't ask that question, the list is far too long. Anyway, so I've got my circle punch and I chose which pieces I would like. And so I'm going to cut off this 6 square block so that I can use it. Trim a little bit off just so that my circle can reach the centre of those 4. There you go, I'm using my glue eraser to get rid of it. And I'm just punching out a circle across the centre point of those 4 design pieces. So we've got a nice cross in the middle. Pop my punch away, and then I was trying to decide which to go top and bottom, but I felt like they sort of got lost. So I dug out a couple of my circle dies and thought I would do a backing with some craft card. So the smallest one was too small, but the next size up worked perfectly to give these circles a bit of a border. So just using my little small sidekick die cutting machine, I'm going to cut one of these circles out for each. So we're going to have one on the top, one on the bottom. And I like this circle, it's just a little bit larger than the circle that I punched out, which gives it a nice edge. I did then have a think, because the die cut edge it has a sort of faux stitching effect, whereas obviously my punch doesn't. But it was a little bit smaller than the punch. So what I did was I die cut it out of some white printer paper, just so that I could put it on top and see which I preferred. Now I think that's too much of a border. As much as it would be nice to have the faux stitching, I think that's too much of a border, so I did leave that and I did the punched circles on them. So I'm going to stick these onto the front of our die cut circles. What works really nicely is that this punched circle fits just inside the faux stitching lines, so it does look like they were meant to be together, which is really good. So I'm going to glue these onto the front, and then I'm going to start thinking about how we're going to do our closure. Now we're doing the ribbon, like the thread tie type closure, and with those you kind of need to have a spacer or something behind your card just to give it that little lift so that the thread can get behind it. So I figured out where the centre points was, where I wanted them, and I was racking my brains trying to think how I was going to do this, because I don't have any spacers. I have ordered some little plastic spacers, but they haven't arrived yet. So I was thinking about how to do it. So I'm going to pull this off, and we're going to attempt to punch a hole in the centre. However, where I wanted it was ever so slightly too high for my crocodile to work. And then I decided, rather than do my big hole punch, which is this one, actually I was just going to poke a hole using my pokey tool. So I got out my little cutting board, poked a hole through, which would be big enough for our Brad, that's not a problem. Did the same on the bottom one, because then I've got the pieces lined up. I moved that one, so I had to line it up again on the page. I've got the holes lined up in both the circle and the design paper. Then, thinking about the gap, I decided that I have two smaller circle punches. And I thought this middle-sized one, I would punch out 2 each per piece. So that means it would just lift it ever so slightly away from the design paper without being floppy, without causing lumps and bumps. It will just give it a little bit of a lift so that you can get your thread behind it. And then I'm just clamping it closed with the clips just till the glue dries. Then I'm going to figure out which brads I'm on. I've got these ones which have like a plus and a minus on, so they look a bit like screws, which I thought was super cute. So I got one of each colour out and just had a look to see which I thought worked best with the design paper. And then I got out 1 plus and 1 minus in that colour to go on each of the gaps. Then went to push this pin through, and originally I was going to use my smaller brads, which were able to fit through that gap, but this one I did need to make the hole because these brads are slightly larger. So if you look on any of my previous mini albums where I've used brads, I've used tiny brightly coloured ones, which are beautiful, but I thought that these worked slightly better. And then I'm just lining up the cross on the brad with the cross, or the dotted cross on the paper where it's a patchwork piece, and then the same on the other one. I'm just lining up the negative, the minus, with the line across the paper. Put these on the back. I'm then going to use a little bit of tape to secure them, give it a quick burnish to make sure that they are stuck down, and then we're going to attach our thread. So on the bottom one, I'm wrapping it round, tying a knot, wrapping it round, tying a knot. Once that is done, I'm going to trim it down and glue it underneath the circle. Then we can stick these onto our flaps. So I'm adding a little bit of glue over the tape as well, lining that up nicely, burnish that on, and you can see where my bone folder goes underneath, because we've got that gap, that rise of the 2 little bits of craft card means that if my bone folder can go underneath it, then the threads definitely won't get caught, which is always really useful, because I do find sometimes they can get caught. The first time I did it, I didn't put anything on, and I had to actually bend it up to make sure it worked, so didn't want to go through that again. I then chose a little charm. It's a little sort of counting blocks. It's got an ABC block on it. You could attach this with like a jump ring and a clip, but what I found with that is that it will then slide up and down the thread, which means it can get caught. So all I've done is just add a couple of knots on the end, stuck some glue on it, and then while that's drying, we're going to use some other design paper. I decided I wanted to use this floral one, which I thought was really pretty for the inside. So I'm going to measure that up. We're going to do the lightest one on the left flap, and then to break it up a little bit, I'm going to use the darker one on the right hand flap. I do really like this paper, but I think on this one I feel like the blue is slightly too light, and I feel like the dark is slightly too dark. If they both sort of came in a smidge, I think they would be absolutely perfect pages. But so there we go, trimmed that down. I'm going to glue that on with our punched corner and popping that paper behind, just so I can see my edges, because you know, craft on craft is difficult to see in person, let alone on video. So I just thought I'd do that under there, so I'll make sure I get it lined up nicely, and again here so I can see my edge. I do love this paper pad, it is just so pretty. So we're going to stick this one on, and then I think we're almost done. We've just got to do the inside of all the pieces. Now that our glue is dry, I'm going to snip off the end of that thread, and then we have got our charm complete. So then I was trying to decide top and bottom what I was going to do. I couldn't. So I decided to do the backing paper, and I thought I'd bring back the same design, because when it's closed you can't see it, and when it's open you can't see it, so it's not going to be too much of an overload. So I've popped this on the back, and then I was trying to think of a way to make it slightly more interesting than just having a back panel. And so I had a thought about putting a slit in it so that we could slide something behind it, a bit like a tuck spot but more obvious. So on the back of this, I came in, I found the middle, I drew a line at the middle, I then came down 1.5 inches, drew a line across at 1.5 inches, stopped about I think an inch or 3, about 1 inch in from each side, and that's where I'm going to cut. You can do this 2 ways. The first way I'm going to show you, I'm doing it on my trimmer. So I'm lining up and I'm just snipping, like cutting that line. I was then going to do a second one on my trimmer, and I thought, actually, do you know what? I'm just going to mark where I want it, and then I'll show you a different technique. So if you have got a blade and a cutting board, you can do it with any sort of craft knife. Again, you're going to need a ruler with a metal edge just to make sure that it is going to stay in a straight line and you don't cut into your ruler by mistake. So I've lined my paper up with the ruler. I'm just making my line a little bit darker so I can see where I need to stop cutting. Going to line this up and just trim another line with my craft knife. So what you're doing here is you want maybe 1/8 of an inch, a couple of millimeters, that you can remove so that you've got a thicker slot, if that makes sense. And then you're going to cut that tiny piece of design paper out, and then you've got a really clear gap for where you're going to slide in your pieces. What I also like to do, which I saw someone else do, is punch a hole at the end, and it just gives it this really nice effect. Now, what I also realised here was that the it didn't really show this slot sort of got lost. So what I decided I wanted to do was to put something over the top to make it really visible for everyone. So I got a piece of craft card, found one that was nice and thin. That one was a bit thick, so I went with the thinner version. Cut it down to the length, and then I did exactly the same thing in the craft card. So I cut a line, a couple of millimetres, 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch down, cut another line, and then punched the holes on each end and stuck this over the top. And what that did was that allowed me to make the slot actually really visible. So rather than it just being like a gap and you're not sure what it is, having this piece around the edge really made it very visible. This time I tried it a different way, so instead of cutting the line first, I did the holes first. Now this is a tiny piece, so all I've done is temporarily taped it to a larger piece, just to make it easier to hold for me to do the hole punching. And I'll do the same thing in a minute when I decide I want to do rounded edges for this piece. I would advise doing the rounded edges if you're doing them before you cut the slot, because it was a little bit fiddly. So I've punched the holes, and then I'm going to get the same equipment out. I've got my cutting mat, I've got my blade, I've got my metal edged ruler. I'm just going to stick this down because it's such a small piece, and then using my blade I'm going to cut from one punched hole to the other punched hole, leaving a slight gap in the middle. You could do a middle line and then cut either side, or you could just cut from either side, and where you've got the hole punch it will just pop that piece out, which is really nice. Because I had stuck it down to the mat, it actually left that slot stuck to my mat. So there you go, you can see that gap just fits over nicely. I needed to widen the gap on my design paper slightly because of where I had cut the brown, but then I stuck it on and thought, that needs a rounded edge. And because it's such a small piece again, it was tricky to get a rounded edge, so I just stuck it to a piece of printer paper, and that meant I could line up the edges much easier to round them. As I said, if you wanted to round these, I would suggest doing them beforehand. Alternatively, what you could do is create this strip, stick it to your design paper, and then cut the slot. It is totally up to you. So that's stuck on now with our slot, and I wanted to just put a little bit of white behind it so you can see that there is actually designed to be a slot. So I cut this piece, I'm just going to temporarily tape it on so I know it covers the hole. I'm then going to put glue on the little piece of printer paper so that we can stick that on and make sure that that stays in the right place, because we need to make sure that hole has got the white backing so it's very clear. Once that is glued down, I'm going to stick our design piece over the top, and then we've got this nice slot, which I really like. It shows, it's just a different way of putting some extra pieces in. It doesn't add a lot of bulk. So we're going to glue the sides, the top and the bottom, but not the centre. You really need to leave that centre point separate so that it slots in. And then we're going to create a tag to go inside. So I'm measuring the size and I'm cutting this piece down.
What are you doing, monkey? What are you doing, huh? Hello. Yes, go on then, lie down. What are you doing? You're a terror, aren't you? You terrorise me, don't you? Hello. What are you doing, you monster? Sorry guys, my battery died. So I had to dig out my charger, and in the process I got a visitor, and seeing as everybody has been asking after her, I thought I would record while she's still here. Yes, hello baby, hello. You're going to say hello to your adoring fans, are you? Because everybody's asking after you. No one asks how I am. They all ask how you are. Can we not knock everything off though? That would be really appreciative. I would. Yes, you're very lovely. It is nearly dinner time, you are correct, but not yet. You've still got an hour, I'm afraid. You have still got an hour. I know you're probably very hungry now because it's hard being you, isn't it? Yes, that's the ink. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Are you going to let me do any more work? Are you going to let me do any more work at all? No. Okay. I'm just going to cuddle. You're in a cuddly mood, are you? See, now I wouldn't mind if you sat on my lap and then I could craft and stroke you at the same time. But you don't get that bit, do you? No, you just want to be here. Ah, dear. You are so pretty, aren't you? See, now you've got bits of rubber on you because you've been rubbing your face on my desk. You are hopeless. Hopeless. Let me get a picture of you disturbing my crafting. Of course, you're now going to move because I want to take a picture, aren't you? Don't knock that off, please. Don't knock that off. I need that. Oh, there we go. We're actually posing for the picture this time. Posing for the picture, huh? That I can't take because my phone's now died. Everything is dying. I'm using all the battery today, aren't I? Darling, you're so cute. Yes. But if you don't let me finish this, then I'm not going to be... Thanks for rubbing snot on my glove. I'm not going to be able to feed you if I'm still down here when it's dinner time. No. I don't want your bum in my face. I love you. I do love you. Come on. Come on. Let me finish, please. Down you go. Come on. Good girl. Good girl. Right, let's remove some cat fur because it is in my nose and everywhere.
Okay, so what I did, I cut the tag, which you did miss when my camera died, but that slots in the back. I then also cut down this design paper. Now, you could just cut from the bottom, but for me, I had 3 squares and a tiny bit, and that really upset my brain. So what I did was I trimmed the top and the bottom so that I've got the 3 centre squares, and then a tiny bit above and a tiny bit below. If you are not quite as obsessive as I am, sorry, I'm just cleaning cat fur off my hands there. If you're not quite as obsessive as I am about your design paper, you can probably just cut it straight. I just didn't like that it was uneven because you had the top bit and the bottom bit. And then I cut out the centrepiece because I didn't want to use the same square of paper as I have that middle design because I didn't want to overload it. So I then measured the width, and again, it wasn't wide enough for 2 full squares. You could just come in from one side if that's what you want to do. I decided to trim from both ends, make my life really difficult, just so that the pattern fit nicely. If you are not quite as obsessive or concerned about it as I am, then that is absolutely fine. You can just come in from one side and cut it to fit your flap. But apparently my brain was not having any of it this day, so I sort of made this flap really difficult for myself. I know the people that received the album wouldn't have even noticed or cared, and I'm sure nobody else does, but it was the way my brain was working that day. So I did trim down top, bottom and sides so that we had sort of an even border on those of the pieces. Please don't feel like you have to do exactly the same as me. This was an awful lot of work, and I kind of wish I could have just cut it as it was, but I didn't. So I did that on one flap, and then I did exactly the same on the other flap. It was already the right height because I pre-cut a long piece, and then we can do the other flap. I did it exactly the same way, found the middle point of the flap, found the middle point of the paper, made sure I came in and measured where I wanted it to be. I'm just gluing down that middle flap because it was coming up on the edges, and again measured this down to fit. You again don't need to do that. So I lined this up with this piece, measured it and cut it, which made it a little easier than the first piece, but still more fiddly than it needed to be, and it left me with these little strips that I don't know whether I'm going to be able to use, but they've gone in my scrap box anyway because that's what I do. keep everything until the end of the project, because you never know. So there we go. I'm going to pop the corner punch on there, glue this down, and then we just need to do the inside of our top and bottom flap. And I wanted to do another design paper on this rather than the blue, because this has got a lot of design paper on, and I thought this was quite a nice piece. You've got so much space on this that actually it worked. So I got the stalk stripy piece with this foil line, and it worked really nicely to be able to cut the right length. I was able to cut along the silver foiled line. So I cut the right width, and then I cut off the flap, and then where I said the same about the teddy bears on the booklet, that if you cut it straight away it looked really obvious that the pattern continued. With this I didn't want the same thing, so I cut the bottom piece from the bottom of the sheet. I then cut the top flap from the top of the sheet so that it didn't have the cut off at exactly the same point, so again it wasn't jarring. This one isn't too bad because it is striped, so it doesn't affect it quite as much, but again I went from the top just to make sure that that didn't affect me or anyone else. I'm sure nobody else would have noticed. That's what my best friend and my other half tell me, is that no one else would notice, it's absolutely fine, but I notice. So it's only me that I make life more difficult for. I don't make it more difficult for anyone else. You guys can all do this in a much simpler way than I can, I'm sure. So yeah, I'm going to stick this flap on, and then we are pretty much done. I really like this double page. I think this has come together really nicely. Yes, I love it. I hope you do too.
Okie dokies. So that is where I'm going to leave it for today. So we've done our next 2 months. So quick recap on 7 months. We have got the book that opens and opens and opens and opens with our ribbon closure. And then for 8 months, we've got the tie closure. You can obviously make shorter than I have. Then the explosion page, or the page that I'm looking for a new name for. And then we've got a tag in here, which I will complete towards the end with some of the scraps and do a nice sort of patchwork tag. So yes, that is where we are at. Thank you very much for spending time with me today, guys. Keep crafting, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.